Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Tom Cruise accepts his final mission as Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. 2 months after the events of Dead Reckoning, Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise, still has the cruciform key that will help him stop the increasingly powerful AI entity. As the world nears the brink of nuclear destruction, Ethan and his team need to get to the entity's source code by locating the sunken Russian submarine Sevastopol and destroy the entity once and for all. Well, after 30 years, Tom Cruise has finally decided to hang up his running shoes and is retiring from the Mission Impossible franchise. I mean, can you blame him? Cruise first starred in the film version of the 60s television series in 1996 when he was 34. He's 62 now, and while he's looking extremely good for it, there's probably only so long he can keep doing those incredibly intense stunts that the Mission Impossible movies are known for. So once again he's reteamed with his regular co-collaborator Christopher McQuarrie, who returns to the director's chair for the 4th film in a row, and he also writes the script once again. McQuarrie and Cruise have a very long creative partnership that goes back to Valkyrie, and he's often been called in to brush up the scripts for most of Cruise's films since then, credited or not. But while Cruise himself has shown little sign of slowing down outside Mission Impossible, the franchise itself has shown a little bit of it lately. While Fallout is considered to be one of the best action films of the last decade, Dead Reckoning was a little bit underwhelming at the box office. This was despite the fact that it was marketed heavily as being Part 1 in a 2-part finale for the series, but that part of the title was soon dropped after it left cinemas. It's rather telling that even though this is a continuation, they've given this a new standalone title to emphasise that this really is the very last one. And I have a lot of fondness for the Mission Impossible films. I saw the first when I was 6 years old on VHS, and it's probably a big reason why I became so into films when I was a kid. Aside from the second one, which has kind of become the black sheep of the franchise, the series has been very consistent in quality, and I've been to see every entry since the third in the cinema when they came out, and I'm certain I'm not the only one who has grown up alongside this franchise, and the expectations for this last one are massive, and I'm sure that Cruise and McQuarrie are aware of that. The mission, which they've chosen to accept, is not only try and wrap up the story they started in Dead Reckoning, but also do so for the entire several-decade-long franchise. And in order to try and top what they've done before, it has to be the biggest, most spectacular, most impossibilist film they've ever done. So do Cruise and McQuarrie succeed in their mission? Well, they light the fuse. But this doesn't quite end things on as big a bang as I'd hope. Honestly, it comes perilously close at times to being a bit of a disappointment. And the unwieldiness of what the Final Reckoning has to accomplish can be seen right from the very start, where it opens with Ethan Hunt watching a VHS tape that not only has a lengthy recap of all the key plot points of Dead Reckoning, but also the entire franchise itself from the very beginning. Images and stunts from all 7 previous entries, yes, even the second one, all quickly flash before your eyes to not only remind you, but also whet your appetite for what's to come. The movie sets up the idea that every mission Ethan has done before has all been building up towards this one. It even goes out of its way to call back to plot points from earlier installments and try to retcon them into this conclusion. Remember that MacGuffin from ages ago? Well, now it's this, and that's important. Even though that kind of undermines the simplicity of it in the first place, and it's a bit of a stretch to try and force it to fit into this story. And trying to force those connections back is definitely one of the weaker aspects of this finale. While there is one major callback that I did like, oh hey, it's that guy! It mostly adds a lot of stuff that means ultimately very little and could have just easily been cut. For instance, one character has a revelation that should be a major part of the film, but then that character is mostly on the sidelines until they resolve this subplot with no one actually doing anything. That's not a character arc, that's just conflict for the sake of having a conflict. And it makes you wonder, why is it there? Is this meant to be some weird apology to fans of the TV show? What's the point? But normally these films start with some big exciting action to get your pulse racing, most famously with Ethan hanging onto the side of a plane during takeoff to open Rogue Nation, very much in the style of James Bond. And while you do get some action in the opener here, mostly you get characters talking about the plot at each other after you've already had the plot told to you extensively by this point. It sets a pattern for much of the rest of the film. Characters don't really have conversations, they deliver exposition at each other, and then someone else delivers some more exposition, and after that, even more exposition. The movie has a pretty bad case of telling rather than showing. We're told the world is at the brink, that people have developed a cult-like deification of the entity, which, like having an AI villain in the first place, is rather eerily prescient right now. But aside from the beginning in London with some protesters, Ethan and his team run around a remarkably empty world bereft of people who aren't speaking characters. Ethan does the longest Tom Cruise run in recorded history, going halfway across London on foot seemingly, with not a single person on the street. There's a later scene where the team drives up somewhere and they note that no one else is present, explaining that they've all been sent home due to a looming annihilation. The IMF talk about their oath to the people we never meet, but where are they? Dead Reckoning was filmed at the height of COVID, but you'd almost think it was this one, as that first part was way more populated, and it creates a strangely detached feel when it should be making us see and feel that the world is falling apart. Instead, we get lots and lots of dialogue, which tells us how bleak things are getting, that everyone is distrustful of each other, and is only getting worse with each passing moment. There's an excessive amount of time spent on people in meeting rooms and offices, usually headed up by Angela Bassett's president, who was formerly the CIA director in Fallout, with lots of recognisable faces like Nick Offerman and Mark Gatiss, looking very, very serious in tightly framed close-ups, sometimes at Dutch angles, just to mix things up a bit. And if you think I'm bleating on about all the dialogue, then that's only because for a full hour of The Final Reckoning, it's all talk and no action. It's not that this is different to the later several Mission Impossible films, it's just the sheer quantity of it. Those scenes were there to link together the big extended set pieces, which broke them up a bit. Here, it's so much dense, sustained waffle that you start to glaze over a bit. I had a bit of a eureka moment. Bear with me on this. The later Mission Impossible films work as well as they do because they work on the same principle as improv comedy. Yes, and just constantly trying to escalate, and that's especially true in the action sequences. They set up a tense situation, then something unexpected will happen that will make things even more difficult, so Ethan or someone else has to quickly adapt, and then something goes wrong with that, and that requires an even more precarious solution. That's how these films keep maintaining the tension, by building upon themselves, and that's what makes them so thrilling and watchable. But yes, and does not apply when it comes to plotting. When you set up an all-out nuclear war at the beginning of the movie, the stakes literally cannot get any higher than that. McQuarrie keeps trying to make things even higher, but after that point, it simply becomes, yes, we know. Plot is not the same thing as story, and The Final Reckoning exemplifies that. The story itself is extremely simple, but there's a hell of a lot of plot. If you thought that Dead Reckoning was overplotted, oh boy, you ain't seen anything yet. Plot, 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 plot. Plot is the mechanics, the busy work, and this movie has a lot of characters needing to go here to do this, they need to do this thing, and it needs to be done at this very exact moment. There's more specific instructions than an IKEA manual. It bogs the movie down, not just because it needs to explain all this stuff as mentioned, but it just keeps adding steps. Why does he need to go to an aircraft carrier for some minor scenes with Hannah Waddingham on his way to a submarine when he could just go to the submarine directly? Isn't that more economical storytelling? The plottiness also comes at a bit of a disservice to the team outside of Ethan, who are largely there for its whims rather than given moments for themselves. That's not helped by the fact that they spent much of the film away from Ethan. I think that one of the best parts of the recent outings has been them all working together as a unit, really leaning in on that team element. So it's very reliant on your connection with them from previous films. So Simon Pegg remains likeable as Benji, a sadly underutilised Ving Rhames has got more soulful as he's got older as Luther, and Haley Atwell returns as Pickpocket Grace, who is still a bit of a novice outsider when it comes to espionage. Joining the team this time is Pom Clementine Paris, who switched sides at the end of the previous film and remains memorably eccentric despite her small role. Also switching sides is Greg Tarzan Davis' Dager, who spent the last movie chasing Ethan with Cher Wiggums-Briggs. Now he's working alongside him. This is actually Davis' third film in a row with Cruise. He was also in Top Gun Maverick, but he wasn't exactly memorable in Dead Reckoning, and that doesn't change here. He might have more screen time and prominence, but he's still given very little to do. He's arguably the most generic of any team member that has been featured in these movies. As I said, Cruise's Ethan gets a lot of screen time by himself here, and the character remains the righteous moral centre of the series, although there is rather a lot of speechifying that he's the only one who can take down the entity, almost to the point of making him a chosen one. You can feel the Cruise indulgences here from the fact that he spends a lot of time showing off his ripped physique. I mean, if I had that at 62, I'd be doing that too, to be honest. To a bit where Nick Offerman and others read off his past exploits with awe. Yes, we saw that in the video package at the start. Do we really need to be reminded of them yet again? But one thing you definitely can't deny is that Cruise remains absolutely committed to doing the biggest, craziest stunts possible, and the film finally starts to ignite in the second half, when it at last gets down to what we came here to see, starting with Ethan diving down to the sunken Russian submarine. That sequence where he makes his way through, trying to navigate around a maze of displaced torpedoes in a perilously rolling sub, is a truly nail-biting and claustrophobic sequence, especially as it's done without hardly any dialogue at all, and after all the dialogue that came before it, you'll appreciate the respite. It's also simultaneously one of the most preposterous moments of the entire franchise. Not so much Mission Impossible as medically implausible that he manages to survive that. Even by these film standards, that's a real stretch, requiring not one but several contrivances like a mobile decompression chamber to try and get you to buy it. But hey, it's at least exciting and ridiculous. And from that point forward, the film is giving you the kind of thrills you want from a Mission Impossible movie, and the second half is a big improvement on the first, culminating in an absolutely phenomenal cross-cut climax that keeps amping up the pressure. The highlight is, of course, Ethan hanging on the sides of several biplanes in mid-air in a chase that genuinely had me on the edge of my seat. Again, not the first time that famous aviation fan Tom Cruise had a big airborne stunt to climax one of these films. It actually feels a bit reminiscent of the helicopter battle in Fallout, but it is truly vertigo-inducing. I was sweating buckets seeing Cruise once again putting himself on the line for our entertainment, especially once it turns into an airborne fight scene. It's a truly breathtaking piece of choreography and stunt work that's right up there with the very best this series has to offer. As the last ever set piece, it certainly ends the series on an appropriately high note, and it should be enough that it gets rid of some of the bitter taste of the overly sluggish early sections. And that's the thing, there's a lot wrong here, but the stuff it gets right is truly breathtaking. And I can't really hate a film that, despite the gloom, says that no matter how grim things may seem, the future can be and is worth fighting for, and with the right amount of luck, anything's possible. The Final Reckoning just about accomplishes its mission, but it's also a deeply flawed entry that may ultimately be one of the weaker films in the series, not reaching the heights of Ghost Protocol or Fallout. Ultimately, this Mission Impossible is a victim of trying to do too much, and the strain shows. Too much plot, too much dialogue, and far too many characters that it doesn't quite know what to do with. As much as I love Henry Kernsley's Kittredge and his tense relationship with Ethan, he's just kind of floating around the film, and it continues to have some of the problems that it inherited from Dead Reckoning, like a weak physical villain in the form of S.A. Morales' Gabriel, the former servant of the entity who's now trying to control it. Well, I think he is. His fuzzy motivations are mostly whatever stands in Ethan's way, and his ability to pop up with nuclear bombs all over the place. I did notice that the film has abandoned trying to explain any further the connection that Gabriel had to Ethan's past, which was set up in Dead Reckoning, but wasn't really given a proper conclusion, and that weakens him even further. It's also a hint that Part 1's mixed reception has led to a retool between films, which might explain some of the jankiness here. It definitely would have benefited from an editor to really tighten things up, but there's enough brilliant, exciting moments that makes this still worth watching, even if the film really makes you work for them at times. It is not the best mission, but the fuse doesn't lead to a damp squib either. If you like this review and you want to support my work, you can give me a tip at my Ko-fi page, or my YouTube Super Thanks feature, which is right below the video. Or your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join my Patreon, where you can see my videos early among other perks, including access to my Discord server, and you can also join YouTube memberships for similar perks. Or you can just simply like, share and subscribe, it really does help. Until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, and this review will self-destruct in 5 seconds.